Good day, everyone. My name is Juvia Martinez from 3E12 POLA Cluster, and I will be your discussant for today. And now I'll be discussing one of the top topics of early periods in English literature, which is the English Renaissance. The English Renaissance was a cultural and artistic movement that occurred in England from the late 15th and early 17th century. It was influenced by the Pan European Renaissance that began in Italy in the late 40th century. But it also had its own distinctive features and developments. So, the English Renaissance is also considered to be one of the most brilliant and diverse period in the history of English literature as it produced a wealth of works in various forms and genres such as poetry, drama, prose, and music. The English Renaissance literature also shaped by the several historical, social, and political factors such as the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, the development of the English language and the printing press, the exploration of the human condition and the individual psyche, and the representation of the social and political realities and challenges of the time. The English Renaissance literature was also supported and sponsored by various patrons who were wealthy and powerful individuals or groups who provided financial aid, social status, protection, and recognition to the writers and artists of the time. One of the main characteristics of English Renaissance literature was the variety of forms and genres that it employed. The dominant art forms of the English Renaissance were literatures and music, while visual arts are much less significant than Italian Renaissance. The English Renaissance literature experimented with the new forms and genres of writing such as sonnets, essays, epics, and dramas. Some of the most influential writers who shaped the English language and literature were William Shakespeare, Edmund Spenser, Christopher Marlowe, Francis Bacon, and John Milton. Shakespeare is widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language and one of the greatest dramatists of all time. He wrote 37 plays and 154 sonnets that explore various themes such as love, beauty, time, mortality, and art. Spencer was a poet who wrote The Fairy Queen, an epic poem that allegorically depicts the virtues and vices of the human condition as well as the political and religious conflicts of the time. Christopher Marlowe was a playwright and a poet who wrote Dr. Faustus, a play that dramatizes the legend of Faust, a scholar who sells his soul to the devil in exchange for knowledge and power. Francis Bacon was a philosopher and a writer who wrote the Essays, a collection of short writings that cover a wide range of topics such as truth, death, love, friendship, wisdom, ambition, revenge, and nature. And John Milton was a poet who wrote Paradise Lost, an epic poem that retells the biblical story of the fall of man from the perspective of Satan and his rebel angels. Another main characteristic of the English Renaissance literature was the influence of several historical, social, and political factors that shaped the context and the content of the works. The English Renaissance literature was influenced by the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, which led to religious conflicts, debates, and reforms in England. Many writers expressed their views on the religious issues of the time, such as Martin Luther, John Calvin, Henry VIII, Thomas More, John Donne, and John Milton. The English Renaissance literature was also influenced by the development of the English language and the printing press, which enabled the spread of literature and literacy among the masses. Many writers experimented with the English language and its possibilities and also borrowed words and ideas from other languages such as Latin, Greek, French, and Italian. The English Renaissance literature was also influenced by the exploration of human condition and the individual psyche, which reflected the Renaissance spirit of curiosity, skepticism, and creativity. Many writers explored the themes of love, death, power, identity, and morality, as well as the complex and contradictory aspects of human nature. Some of the most notable examples of these are Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, Paradise Lost, and The Fairy Queen. The English Renaissance literature was also influenced by the representation of the social and political realities and challenges of the time, which included the rise and fall of the Tudor and Stuart dynasties, the expansions of British Empire, the conflicts with Spain and France, the civil wars, and the execution of Charles I. Many writers commented on the political events and issues of the time, such as Thomas More, Thomas Wyatt, Sir Philip Sidney, Sir Walter Raleigh, John Milton, and Andrew Marvell. A third main characteristic of the English Renaissance literature was the support and sponsorship of various patrons who were wealthy and powerful individuals or groups who supported and sponsored the writers and artists of the time. They provided them with financial aid, social status, protection, and recognition. Some of the most prominent patrons in the English Renaissance literature were Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth I was the most influential patron in the English Renaissance as she fostered a culture of learning, creativity, and patriotism among her subjects. She supported many writers and poets such as Edmund Spenser, Sir Philip Sidney, Christopher Marlowe, and William Shakespeare. She wrote some occasional poems herself and was praised by many writers for her wisdom, beauty, and virtue. Next is the Earl of Leicester, was one of the closest and most powerful courtiers of Queen Elizabeth I and a patron of arts and science. He founded the Leicester Academy, a group of scholars and writers who met at his estate to discuss and exchange ideas. He also sponsored many writers and poets such as Edmund Spenser, Sir Philip Sidney, Walter Raleigh, and Robert Greene. The Earl of Southampton was a young and wealthy nobleman who was a patron and friend of William Shakespeare. He is widely believed to the dedicate of Shakespeare's early sonnets, which express a passionate and platonic love for him. He also supported other writers and poets such as John Florio, Thomas Nasher, and Barnaby Barnes. The Countess of Pembroke was the sister of Sir Philip Sidney and a patron and writer of poetry and prose. She completed her brother's unfinished epic poem, the Arcadia, and wrote several original works such as a dialogue between two shepherds and a discourse of life and death. She also supported many writers and poets such as Samuel Daniel and Michael Drayton. The Sidney family was a prominent and influential family of writers, patrons, and statesmen. They included Sir Robert Sidney and the Earl of Leicester, Sir Philip Sidney, and the Countess of Pembroke. They were known of their literary achievements, their political involvements, and their support of arts and science. Also, they sponsored many writers and poets such as William Shakespeare, Edmund Spenser, Christopher Marlowe, and Ben Jonson. And that's all. Thank you.